So I am so pleased to be in conversation with you, Mayor Landrieu. We are going to talk about some of the big things that are happening in this country. And I really want to start by talking about you. I want you to tell this crowd about yourself, right? You grew up in a political family. You were a lieutenant governor in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit your state, home state of Louisiana. You were mayor of New Orleans during a big construction boom, and also when there was a real call to reckon with our racial past and take down Confederate monuments. So you have had a lot to do with being in community and really governing in communities that were dealing with big public investments. So I want you to talk about how your family's history and your own history shaped your view of why we need to invest in America and how we need to invest in America.
Wow, that's a big question. Anyways, that's a big question. Thank you. It's nice to see all of you. I'm mindful of this very special room that we're in, where President Lincoln once spoke, and that makes you really think about big issues and big ideas. My dad told me once, he said, don't ever confuse who you are with what you are. And all the things that you talked about. I was trained as a lawyer. I was a legislator for 16 years. I was lieutenant governor, mayor. But he said, always remember that you're somebody's husband or wife, that you're somebody's father, you're somebody's brother or sister, you're somebody's child. And that kind of keeps you rooted in, it doesn't really matter what you are, the who you are really informs that. And that has come to be true because of where I grew up. I grew up on the corner of Priya Street and General Pershing, the 12th Ward, 18th Precinct in the city of New Orleans, in a neighborhood that was one of the first mixed neighborhoods. I'm one of 9 kids. I'm the 5th kid, the middle kid. So I'm used to people not listening to anything that I have to say. So y'all, and I have 8 brothers and sisters. Between us, we have 38 kids. And we grew up on the street in front of my house. And pretty much everything that I've learned in my life, be fair, be just, help other folks out, is pretty much formed my entire life. My dad, in 1960, was a young legislator who had just gotten elected. My mother and father had 4 kids. I was in utero, and my father was one of the 2 legislators that voted against the governor's plan to keep the schools segregated. And that night, his life was threatened by Leander Perez and Willie Rainick, who were 2 of the great racists in the history of America. And that kind of set us on course to live in a way that always
set you and your whole family on course?
Yeah,
you mean, in terms
me and my whole family
right.
on course to basically be involved in treating people fairly and justly. My dad went on to be the mayor of the city. He was a cabinet secretary. My sister was a United States senator. But essentially, our whole life was formed around trying to be with people and help people on the street where you live. And that's been the view of everything that I've done structurally and functionally since then. So in my time as a legislator, in my time as lieutenant governor and mayor, they were all important and they were all formative, but I happened to be the lieutenant governor when Katrina hit. So 2005, August 29th, Katrina comes in. It's a Cat 5 storm. It hits as a Cat 4 storm. It kills 1,800 people. It hurts 500,000 homes. It destroys 250,000 of them. And the city was underwater, 17 feet of water for a long period of time. Everybody here watched it. And y'all were incredibly helpful. The people of New York were just unbelievable, as were the people of America. And so we had to find a way to rebuild. And when you've ever been in a catastrophic event like that, it really it's stunning and it's traumatic, but everything starts to move in slow motion. And the only thing you want is to go back to the day before when it happened and act like it never happened, but you can't do that because you've lost everything. And not just a little bit of everything, but everything of everything, which is very unsettling because it then challenges your level of confidence in how to build back. So for a couple years, the state kind of struggled, and then a couple years later, I became mayor of the city of New Orleans. So after Katrina, Rita, Ike, Gustav, the national recession, the BP oil spill, I took over a city that was functionally bankrupt. And we had to, as a community, figure out a way through very, very difficult times to put aside all of our differences and run to the fire together and build something back. And the question got to be, well, what are we going to build back? Wow, what do you mean we're going to build back? New Orleans is 300 years old. Build it back just like it was. A lot of people said, no, no, no. It wasn't that great for me before. See, the French Quarter's
And
great.
what kind of people said that to you? Like,
Everybody,
which of your constituents?
people that lived in the city of New Orleans said, well, it didn't always work for me that way. So why don't we figure out how to keep the things that were good, and then why don't we get ourselves ready to build a future that we know is coming our way, technology, innovation, really kind of get diversity right. Make sure that, you know, the economy didn't work for poor folks, didn't work for people of color who had gotten left behind. Why don't we build a whole new thing? And so when the president asked me to come up to Washington, I came up with that ethos in mind. Don't build it back like it was.
Remind our audience that he asked you to come to Washington to oversee the infrastructure law, and you get to be the boss of the infrastructure law.
Yeah.
So just tell him about that.
So one of the things the president ran for office, and he said, I'm going to do three things. He said, I'm going to help restore the soul of America, because it's his view, and I completely agree with him, that we're in a battle. Anand talked about this a little bit earlier today, as did Heather, that we're in a battle between autocracy and democracy, fascism and freedom. There are these tectonic waves crisscrossing all across the world that are manifesting themselves in America that we didn't think would be here at this time. And so we have to remind ourselves that freedom's not free. You got to fight for it every day. You got to show up every day. You got to talk about it every day. And the president said we're out of bounds. We've got to get in bounds and restore the soul of America. I'm not going to read the Lincoln quote for you, even though I'm sitting on the stage and I was at the Lincoln Memorial this last weekend. But if you go back and look at the last paragraph of his second inaugural address, where he calls us to find the better angels among us, that is a really great quote to kind of bring you into communion of where we need to be on restoring the soul of America. The president says the way to do that is to unite America, where we really got to intentionally fight for the things that we believe in, but we have to try to find common ground, which is to say, hear other people, see other people, listen to them, see if we can come to some kind of constructive answer for the problems that we have. And then the third thing he said is, and to do that, I am going to invest in the people of America, and I'm going to invest in the things of America, because we need to learn how to do things together. And so, as a consequence, he passed the American Rescue Plan, passed the CHIPS Act, passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest investment in climate history in the country. And then we passed the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, which is real money, real meat and potatoes, real nothing but hard work investments to rebuild roads and bridges and airports and ports and waterways, high-speed internet, clean air, safe water. Lead pipes, clean air and safe water, replacing all the lead pipes, and to build a clean energy economy. And so I just flew in today, came through LaGuardia, the new terminal, which used to be a disaster, and now it's gorgeous.
It's pretty great now.
It's pretty great. And so if you think about the physical...
By the way, do you think we're telling the story of how the money goes from the federal government to places like LaGuardia? Do you see the signs? Do you see? Are you getting that story out there?
Well, we're doing three things, basically, on the infrastructure package. We are building the scaffolding. That means putting together the ability for the federal, state, and local governments to work together like they've never worked before, to actually figure out how to build this stuff. And that takes a huge amount of time, because, as you know, the federal government sometimes doesn't show up. Or if they show up, they're hard to find. Or if they're hard to find, it's hard to get money out of them. And then they got to work with all of the governors, and they've got to work with all of the mayors. And so one of my team's jobs is to put all of that scaffolding together. The second part is to actually get the money out of the door. It goes out of the door two ways. Half of it goes to the governors, which you guys have to go fight for, the way that people fight for money from your state. And the other way is through direct grants to cities, communities, and tribal communities as well. I was up in Napakiak Village, which is way the hell up in North Alaska, not too long ago, that you can only get to by boat, because the president said go there. A couple of months ago, I was down in Lowndes County, Alabama. I've been in the Delta, been in the Black Belt, been to Selma, been over to Hatch, New Mexico. Y'all know where Hatch is? Hottest, best chili in the world, right? Is that true?
That is true. Excellent chilies.
Excellent chili.
Excellent chilies.
The mayor's name is Slim, big tall guy with a mustache. It's incredible.
So you're going all around the country.
Going all around the country,
okay.
We're doing that. And the third thing we're doing is then we're telling people about it. And you tell people about it like this. You tell people about it by putting signs up, and then you tell people about it by getting free media and commercials, letting them know that all of the stuff that you see going out there is a consequence of tax dollars that you put in the ground that are going to improve your communities. However, let me just say this. As we're thinking about this, we're thinking about not just building back like it was, to the story that I told you about New Orleans. So the question is, if you're going to invest all of this money, you could just go build a bridge just like it was and take the same kind of concrete and put it in the same exact place that split a black neighborhood right down the middle, like Claiborne Avenue, or you can say, hey, why don't we build it different? Well, I don't know, how different can you build it? Well, first of all, you can use materials that are climate friendly rather than stuff that is not. You can make sure that it's an all hazards approach, because cybersecurity is a challenge, and you can do it with new technology. You can actually make sure that you hire firms with people of color, like two of the fantastic women I met, one in Atlanta and one in Detroit, who are engineers that now, with this money's coming down, have access to build the engineering firms and build generational wealth in the community. You can do it in a way that protects yourself from, for example, the next storm that's going to come in. So forgive me for this, but when Katrina hit, everybody, y'all came down there and you helped us. But you kind of thought, you know what? Those people shouldn't be living there below sea level. And you forgot to ask yourself whether or not the financial district was below sea level. And then Sandy hit. Y'all remember Sandy?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember Sandy. You know what else I remember about Sandy? Was that Bellevue, they forgot to put their stuff that ran Bellevue on the roof. They had it in the basement. Because in Katrina, years before that, and when Rita hit, which was another storm, by the way, that hit just a little while over in Lake Charles, we did the same thing. So we had to medevac all these patients because people forgot to put their utilities on the roof rather than in the basement. And so New York never learned from that lesson. And then when Sandy hit, everybody up here went, oh, hell, us too. And people started waking up to the perils of climate and how far behind we were on that, and how we as a country have to figure out how to rebuild that stuff. So when you're rebuilding this bridge, you're thinking about all of those things. And when you think about all of those things, how to connect communities,
right,
how to build generational wealth, how to connect things that didn't happen before, not breaking neighborhoods down, all of a sudden you're using this money to construct a better America.
So Mayor, so the technology, the new materials, all critically important. And you told that story of, in the old, when we used to build roads in the 50s and 60s, we would drive them right through communities of color, right through poor communities. Are we doing better on that now? And how do you make sure that we do better on that now?
1,000%. So Secretary Pete's going to be here in a little while. Secretary Pete's one of the secretaries that oversees on the infrastructure bill, all the stuff coming out of the Department of Transportation. All the other departments are involved. Commerce is involved. Energy is involved in the electric batteries. And my job is to help organize all of them, and they're all doing great work. And Secretary Pete, I'm sure, will tell you about the Reconnect program. This Reconnect program is a $4 billion or so program that is designed to ask communities to come to us and ask us for money for projects that reconnect communities. All right, and you see these things happening all over. You have it in Buffalo. All right, we have one in El Paso. We've got one in Colorado, where what we're doing is, where highways split communities of color, we're actually going and taking those highways down.
Yep.
Or we're digging a hole underground and putting the highway underground, and we're literally reconnecting the neighborhood that had just been cut in half, just like they would cut your arm in half.
Are you bringing folks from those communities to give input to how those projects are going to be built?
Well, they wouldn't get the grant if they didn't propose it to us.
Got it.
So we have communities across the country going, hey, that happened in my city. So in the city of New Orleans, for example, we have a highway that's called the Interstate 10 that just cuts right through Treme. And that's one of the communities that's applying for grants. The grants they're applying for are based on their idea and their plans. And this is happening all over the country. And we have awards that have been given out. By the way, if you want to see all of this stuff, you can go on invest.gov, and it'll show you where every dollar is going. To date, we have 38,000 projects that are going on in the country. And if you look on that website, you can push on the dot, and it'll tell you everything about that project that's been funded.
I'd just like to emphasize that for just a second. First of all, the invest.gov, I feel like I'm going to give a little plug for the website, because it really is incredible.
Good. Yeah, it is.
Just the amount of data that, they're trying to be transparent, showing you where the money goes. But also, let's just hold on that number for a second. 38,000 projects.
Yeah.
close to $300 billion
Right.
already awarded.
Yep.
I mean,
That's a lot.
what's that scale even really look like? And then what does it mean for you to have to coordinate all of that?
Well, a couple things. First of all, as the president likes to say, and this is just true, that when we do things together, we can do big things. And we don't do things together, we can't do many things at all. And I know that sounds trite, but it absolutely is just true. And so that's why his vision of diversity is a strength, not a weakness, and everybody's got to be in makes a big difference, because you can build big things. A long time ago, there's nobody in this room, I'm looking out, I got lights, I can't see everybody, but there's nobody in this room that's as old as Eisenhower or Roosevelt
No.
out there.
I don't think so.
But the last big things like this, just to give you some historical comparisons, were the Work Progress Administration under Franklin Roosevelt that built Central Park, big things like that, plus more, or the Hoover Dam, or the electrification of America, or the interstate system. This
Post
bill,
offices and federal buildings around the country, all
basically
WPA.
everything that you see that's public, that you kind of play around with in your life, got built in another era with big ideas.
That's right.
This idea is as big, if not bigger, depending on how you count it. When you put together the American Rescue Plan, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and this act, it's about $1.9 trillion in real cash before you start leveraging, by the way, the private sector that is now showing up because their money's chasing profit. So if we weren't doing something good, the private sector wouldn't be showing up.
Yeah,
right?
Heather talked about that
and
this
we're
morning.
And we're guiding them to places that matter. We're like, if you want to make money, we're going to invest in communities that have been left behind. And they're like, oh, you know what? It actually pencils out. So you could ask yourself the question, when all the smart economists come around, about whether this is working or not, how much money has the private sector put into this? Over $500 billion in just the last 2 years. So what this means in real time is that in communities that have been left out and burnt out, if any of you guys are from rural areas that had little towns in it, like Sunset, Louisiana, or Oak Ridge, or places like that, they're rebuilding the main streets, because what's happening is people are starting to invest in manufacturing again. We have to manufacture EV batteries. We have to extract lithium from the ground. All these new buses that we're going to create, right? So the kids don't have to get off the bus like I did and suck all that exhaust and go complain to your mother and try to convince her that's really why you got a B on your test. Y'all know that. Y'all tried that, didn't you? You know, all of those things have to be built. And so not only from an equity side are we making sure that the buses and the trains run on time, but we want to make sure that the people that manufacture the buses, the people that get the real jobs, the wages are being spread around to workers as well.
Worker power, unionization.
Well, Heather was here this morning, who's really one of the brilliant minds in America on this issue. And the president's view on this has always been and continues to be this: trickle-down economics does not work. Trickle-down economics has never worked for working class Americans. And so he wants to change that. Now, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and other people have pejoratively called it Bidenomics. And so the president said, fine, I'll take that, just like they tried to call the Affordable Care Act Obamacare. That sounds great, because I think that our vision actually helps lift people up. And he says from the bottom up and the middle out. And people go, what the hell does that mean? What it means is that he's making sure that this money gets down to the ground where it matters, where people live, and where people feel it, and where people touch it. He wants wages going up, not down. He wants more jobs, not less. So all these people that are talking about the economy, your economy grew at 4.9% last quarter. That is stratospheric. We have produced 14.5 million jobs. Wages are going up. Vacancies are going down. Now, inflation continues to be a problem. The cost of things are higher than they used to be, but they're lower in the United States than they are anywhere else around the world, and inflation is heading in the right direction. So the president's theory about how to build a strong economy that's sustainable over time, that is going to prevent us, or at least up to this point, of doing what all the brilliant economists said would be in a recession by now, which we're not. The president's view on this has been, let's just try to have a soft landing, and the way that you help the economy is not by laying off people and reducing wages, but hiring more people and paying people more. And that seems to be a model that up to this point is working fairly well.
Certainly this investment approach, this invest in workers approach, this, make sure you're rebalancing power in this economy so that workers have more and companies have guardrails. Like, this is an approach that my colleagues and I at the Roosevelt Institute have been arguing for at least a decade.
Well, you argued well.
Yeah, we try to argue well, Mr. Mayor. But, I mean, we have to be a little bit honest with ourselves. The results are amazing, and yet it seems to be really hard to tell that story to the American people, right? We've all seen the numbers. The public does not seem to be responding as well as certainly some might hope to the success. So I want you to unpack that a little bit and then tell us some stories from the road that, you know, maybe you've got some better stories than all those polls.
Well, let me say this. There is in governing, when I rebuilt the city with the help of a ton of people, we had to make decisions about whether we're going to be a flash in the pan, so we got patted on the back every day, or whether we were going to build for the future.
Yep.
I would strongly argue that building for the future is better, because you build deeper, it lasts longer, people benefit, and you get a better product. But it's always bucked up against, well, the politics of the day is somebody's got to give you credit or they'll throw you out and you won't get to do it again. So that tension's always there. But essentially, this president has a really long view, which is that we have to really go deep and we have to go wide. Now, clearly, we want people to know that we're doing this, but it doesn't surprise me at all that given the current environment and the things that we've gone through, that people are not really focused on this. Mm-hmm. It takes a long time to build a bridge. It takes a long time to dig a hole. I'll bet you that almost any road, bridge, train, bus, anything you're doing to travel, any water that you drink, any access to high-speed internet that you have, where you see some construction going on, there's got a dollar in it that's being rebuilt. But it's not something that you stop and notice and go, yet, because the seeds are being planted, it's coming out of the ground. And at some point in time, people will begin to realize that we have transformed the economy of the United States forever and put us in a position so that we never have to look over our shoulder again. But in the meantime, people are not feeling that. I mean, remember what we've been through together, you guys. I mean, we've been through COVID. Did everybody in here forget that people were standing in line for food less than 2.5, 3 years ago? Do y'all remember that? It was happening here, right down the street, and there was no vaccine.
Yes.
And we went through that incredible trauma. And then you had Putin's war of aggression in the Ukraine, and then you had all the challenges domestically, and now we have this other awful conflict that is going on as we speak. Yes. And then people are just really kind of worried. It's an unsettling time. And so the fact that they're not concentrating on the fact that we're building a bridge that's going to be done doesn't surprise me at all. I'm fully confident, though, that everybody will come to recognize when this is done that, hey, this was a good idea. This was a good investment. And by the way, this model, if you're being fair-minded, this economic model is a much fairer, better model. It's not going to solve all the problems in the world, but it absolutely was a step, a big step, by the way, in the right direction to restore, as the president said, the soul of the country by uniting us through working together to build things.
Well, that's what Anand and Dorian were just talking about, right? Anand was saying, like, the agenda that all of us in this room share is the most inclusive, the most fair, the most sensible agenda, maybe in human history. That was what Anand said. I'm going to buy that. And we've got to find a way to keep telling that story and bringing some joy to that story too, right? So I want to end on a note of optimism. You have been all around this country. You've been to Alaska, you've been home to Louisiana, you're here in New York now. Who knows where you're going tomorrow? I would love to hear one great story from the road that makes you think, we are getting it right, and people are going to feel it.
Well, listen, this is actually, I've done a lot of this. I've talked to Aquila Grant in Lowndes County, Alabama, or a woman in New Mexico whose home we went to. You know this woman. She lives with her sister. Both of their husbands are deceased. Between them, they're helping raise each other's 4 or 5 kids. They live across the street from the Catholic Church. They used to own a restaurant together, and now they're just trying to figure out how to pay their electric bill. And so we went down there, and we gave them weatherization funds to actually kind of fix their house, to make it more, friendly, and to lower their bills, the windows, the doors.
Okay.
And when you're doing that, they were like, oh my God, I didn't understand that the president can see me. Yesterday, the president was in Minnesota, and he actually met a woman whose name I don't recall, that wrote a letter to me the other day on his behalf and said, hey, please tell the president thank you for getting my lead pipes fixed. She said that we had a leak. We asked somebody to come out. They found out there was lead in the pipes. I called the city, and the city said it's going to cost $12,000 to $15,000 to fix them. And she says, oh my God, we can't do that. We won't be able to pay our bills. I said, don't worry about it. She goes, we have the money to do it. from the bipartisan infrastructure law. And now her kids, as soon as they finish that project, are going to be drinking clean water. Now, that's just in Minnesota, but I was in the Imperial Valley. Anybody here from California?
Me.
Lower California in the Imperial Valley.
Right on the border of Mexico.
Right, exactly, where there's a lot of farmland. They have folks out there working the fields, and they're living in a not so nice mobile home. And I went in there and met their daughter, who's now 18, but who was 13, has been working in the fields with her mom and dad, but living in this trailer that don't have clean water, and it's a real problem. They have arsenic in the water. And so the kind of stuff we're doing, right, is changing that for her so that she can actually grow up and do the things she wants to do. All the little girls, as the president says, that are sitting in the hollers of Kentucky or on a porch in the lower Ninth Ward or in the Delta, who are in the back of their mama's car stealing internet from McDonald's so they can do their homework, so they can grow up and be a doctor and solve the maternal mortality crisis in America. It's that real. It's that close, and it's that touch. And the president wants us to see everybody. And I'll just end with this, so that you know that the president will go anywhere or send us anywhere. A month ago, I was in Alaska. I went to a number of different places. I went to Nome, and actually, you actually can see Russia, by the way. I felt bad about that.
You know the crowd you're in when they laughed at that.
I felt bad about that when I went up there, because it's like 80, it's like right there. I wasn't in my kitchen, but it was like I was right there. But there's a village, there are 246 Native American tribes in Alaska. The other 200 or so are in what they call the lower 48. But we went to Napakiak village because they are suffering from climate disaster after disaster, and the land that they're living on, the spit of land that they're living on that you can only get to by boat, is actually gone away, and the school is about to fall into the water. And so we went up there to look at it, to let them know that we saw them, and we were there. When we went into the little store, the rounds of paper towels that I take for granted, that I get for like, $12 with 8 of them in it, cost $56. And really the only thing, I didn't understand fully, even though I'm from Louisiana and I eat fish and hunt all the time, fish as well, that fish passages, why they're so critically important. And they're so critically important because in some communities in this country, they have subsistence living, and they can only live on what they catch. Moose, salmon particularly. And it was critically important to them that we understood that when people in the halls of Congress were laughing at that kind of stuff, like, why are you trying to save the fish? We're trying to save the fish because that's the thing that people eat to save their lives. And being able to understand that and see people where they are, no matter who, no matter what, no matter where, all comes from the very basic idea that our greatest strength in this country, and don't you ever let anybody tell you this is not true, and if they tell you this, they don't understand where they are. Our diversity is our greatest strength. It is our greatest superpower. It is the thing. We all come to the table of democracy as equals. Everybody gets a fair shot. Everybody's got opportunity. Everybody's got responsibility. But if we're not all in this thing, the thing that we produce is going to be a lot less than when we are. And that's a very simple way for all of us to be. And that's what the president sees. And that's why this legislation is designed the way it's designed. It's why we're running to the fire. It's why we're going to see everybody. It's why we're going to rebuild this country. And right now, in your country, there are 38,000 seeds of greatness that have been planted. Before it's over, it's going to be 100,000 that are going to change the way that we live in this country, in much because of the vision that President Biden and his team have had.
Running to the fire.
Amen.
Planting seeds. I think that is a great place to leave it. Thank you so much, Mayor Landrieu.
You're welcome. Thank you.